Edu Gaspar has resigned as Arsenal sporting director. Here's my reaction. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk. Back again with you guys for joining us this evening for a quick impromptu reaction to what is obviously big news. I'll be able to go into it a lot more tomorrow morning on the 8 a.m. show, but with it being such a significant story, I didn't really want to rest on my laurels here on this, and I wanted to give a brief response and get some of your thoughts as well in the chat box because there is some significant news that we all need to talk about and discuss, and that is, of course, that Edu has resigned as Arsenal's sporting director. In news that when I woke up this morning, I and many others had absolutely no idea this was happening. None whatsoever. It's very few times that you get very little heads up on a story, and it's very, very odd and strange that you get these kind of instances. Usually there's a bit of build up. You'll hear in the days prior to an announcement that these things are happening, and I am utterly and entirely shocked by this story. I genuinely am. It's one of those kind of penny drop moments where you're like, wow, this sport can really take you by surprise. And so I'm going to read through the statement by the club and the words, of course, of Edu and Josh Kroenke. Edu, our former player and Invincible, rejoined us in the role of technical director in July of 2019. He progressed through the club and was promoted to sporting director in November of 2022, where he oversaw the men's, women's and academy football. We thank Edu for the part that he has played in our renewed football strategy and driving the club forward with the values of Arsenal in his heart. Edu said, "This was an incredibly hard decision to make. Arsenal has given me the opportunity to work with so many amazing people and the chance to be part of something so special in the club's history. It has been a special journey, and I thank Stan, Josh, Tim, and Lord Harris for the support they've given me. I've loved working with so many great colleagues across our men's, women's, and academy teams, especially Mikel, who has become a great friend. Now it is time to pursue a different challenge. Arsenal will always remain in my heart. I wish the club and its supporters only good things and all the very best." Co-chairman Josh Kroenke said, "We respect Edu's decision and thank him for his immense contribution and dedication to drive the club forward. Everyone at the club wishes him well. We are all so fond of him and the positive energy he brings to everything and everyone. Change and evolution is a part of our club, and we remain focused on our strategy and winning major trophies. Our succession plan will reflect this continued ambition." That last line we'll talk about shortly. It's very interesting, that last line, I think, and certainly should bring somewhat encouragement to supporters a little bit taken aback by this news. I'm going to read you another quote, a quote that it doesn't anger me. It kind of frustrates. Frustrates is probably the word. Frustrating is probably the word here. And it was from an interview that Edu actually took in 2023 at the it was an award ceremony he was at that he spoke at. He spoke to Sky Sports and he said, this is in 2023, so last year, "I think we were quite clear about all of the steps that we went through. We knew we were going to go through some challenging periods because we had to make some important decisions, sometimes unpopular decisions, which is going to cause some instability. Importantly, we internally was quite together in terms of understanding the process, and then we are where we are. I know there's lots to do. I think we are in the middle of this process. There's still a lot of things to do and carry on doing, but also we are very happy and proud to see where we are at the moment as a club. I think Mikel is, of course, doing a great job, and I think as well as in terms of choosing the right players with that right mentality, with the right spirit as well to be in the squad, we have a fantastic staff around us. We always have to mention that because we're talking about the team. We need everyone to be really good to make the players perform." Just going to go back to that quick comment. This is 2023 last year. He said, "I think we are in the middle of it being the process. There's still a lot of things to do and carry on doing." Now, I don't think that you get to the end of the process at all. When it comes to a year later from where you thought, I think that this is it bothers me in some ways because it does seem like somewhat of a surprise. Maybe not like a wild surprise. Maybe there's been murmurings, for a time. Who knows? Um, we're not privy to that information. It may be that there was more than meets the eye on this, but to say that like you're in the middle of the project and then obviously to leave now a year later, it is strange. Now it's being widely reported, of course, that um, it's widely reported, of course, that um, he's set to accept a job with the Nottingham Forest owner in quite a considerable role, not at Nottingham Forest, but of course at the overall conglomerate of clubs that Evangelos Marinakis is kind of overseeing and owns. David Ornstein reporting that he has agreed to join the group controlled by Marinakis. It's not signed. The role is still to be finalised, but leaving Arsenal for a new post, it includes responsibility for growing operation. And of course, Miguel Delaney of The Independent also reported earlier today that the offer that has come in is set to more than treble Edu's salary. They were willing to offer more than treble what he is currently on at Arsenal. It's frustrating, and I have got my criticism of Edu for leaving the club at this point, because I think that from the perspective of fans and those that have, invested their trust, invested their, words and time into what Edu has said through, many seasons now, it would have been good to see him see this process through to an end, to a more reasonable point. He's not been perfect. He's been a lot better than what people say. Not all people, but certainly some people. I think indeed he's done an 8 out of 10 job for me personally. And we talked a lot this morning on the morning show about how kind of the perspective of Edu is and what job he's done. I think there's a lot of recency bias of the last summer window and a lot of people's opinions of him right now. Overall, without question, Edu's influence since joining the club has seen Arsenal rise again to a team that are competing at the top and with expectation to win trophies and to win the league and the Champions League. That is definitely the expectations and the aims within the club. That's what they're aiming for. So it's frustrating that obviously he is leaving at this point. So where does this leave us? Well, of course, it leaves Arsenal in need of adding a new sporting director, if that is indeed what they want to do. And so despite the fact that it's not going to be absolutely immediate, it's not going to be kind of he leaves today. As with any job, you have kind of a period that you will need to work out. So it'll be interesting to see if he's there for the Nottingham Forest game. Ironically, the next game that we play at the Emirates is against Nottingham Forest on the 23rd of November. So that's quite the narrative as well. It's worth pointing out. And usually I do see Edu after the games walk through the mix zone. So if he's there, that would be interesting. Whether or not he is there, of course, will be another thing. And that's something else. And whether or not the notice period that I assume that he is fulfilling will extend through to that Nottingham Forest game in 3 weeks today. Well, just under 3 weeks today. Time, of course, that is yet to be seen. But I think that it's a huge moment in the Arsenal project under Arteta and obviously Edu as well. It's a huge moment for Arsenal to go out and find the next person. We know that James King has returned to the club in a director of football operations capacity. We know that Richard Garlick has been promoted this season into a managing director role. And we know that Stan and Josh Kroenke, of course, are co-chairmans of the club alongside Tim Lewis, who is a vice chairman at the club as well and has a significant influence on the ongoings at the club as well in the decision-making behind the scenes too from very high up in the setup of the team. So it's going to be interesting. I also think this is obviously going to have a knock-on effect to Mikel Arteta. Mikel Arteta's influence on Arsenal was somewhat felt to be on a par with Edu. It was felt as though that the manager and the sporting director worked kind of on a similar playing field. Edu being technical director before when Arteta was head coach, it was felt like Edu could make decisions around the managerial situation and be something of a superior in the hierarchy to Arteta. Since Arteta was made manager, even when Edu was made sporting director, it felt like the pair of them were kind of on an even keel in terms of their influence and decision-making, with maybe Arteta slightly edging it when it came to signings on the squad and having to have the final sign-off and who indeed is entered into his group of players. But with Edu gone, this leaves something of a vacuum that will need to be filled not only by a replacement, but I think it will also bring with it greater influence from Arteta. And perhaps, when we think about Arsene Wenger's period with the club and how influential he was, it'll be interesting to see how Arsenal move in that direction. I don't think it will get to that level because, as mentioned, there are individuals like Richard Garlick and James King, of course, who are at the club. And there is an expectation that a succession plan, as Josh Kroenke has already told us, will be what is up next for Arsenal. It's also really important to point out that no one man is ever bigger than the club. That goes for Edu, goes for Arteta, goes for the Kroenkes, goes for whoever. Arsenal is always and will always be the most important thing, and decisions have to be taken for the betterment of the club always. It seems that this was a decision that Edu has, of course, made himself. There's no, I don't think, anything kind of undercurrent to this. There's no undercurrent. It's a resignation that was kind of enforced. It's very much a decision that, while maybe there would have been some feeling, I mean, we knew 3 months ago of these links to Nottingham Forest in particular. We knew 3 months ago by those reports that came from Brazil at the time. So it's not like this is completely out the blue. But I don't think this is going to be a massive surprise to everybody. But I do think that this is still very much a decision taken under his own steam rather than anything else. Jackie says, any names that come to mind? Of course, I think what Arsenal should be doing is looking across Europe. Of course, you could still look within the Premier League as well, but I think it's easier to look across Europe and have a look at the teams, of course, that have competed exceptionally well and have done some fantastic business in the transfer market. I think you look at a club like Bayer Leverkusen, and you have a look at the job that has been done by Simon Rolfs there, and you see his work. Leverkusen have built themselves up into an invincible side in the Bundesliga. Whether or not, of course, he would leave is another thing. And then you've got to think about that case for any of those clubs. Eintracht Frankfurt have done really, really well. Union Berlin have grown as a club. Stuttgart, previously with Sven Mislintat, a key part of that group, no longer, of course, but Stuttgart have gone and taken that further forwards and look an impressive side. So are there clubs on the continent that you look at and go, is there, and are there sporting directors out there? Are there individuals at those clubs that could help Arsenal? Of course, we know that Jason Ito was kind of the right-hand man, if you will, to Edu. Sorry, he was kind of working as an assistant sporting director with Edu. So could it be that he progresses into a more senior role and takes some of that void that has been left by Edu? It could be that happens and that Arsenal promote from within instead. I know there's some fanciful people out there that believe that Arsene Wenger could be somewhat involved. I'd be utterly shocked. I think that's a Leicester in the league type odds of happening. But yes, I think you need to look to some other clubs, I think perhaps on the continent, that have done well in recent times and grown and recruited very, very, very well indeed. Some people in the chat box are saying Ralf Rangnick could be someone that Arsenal look at, of course, as well. He is the manager of the Austrian national side, though, as things stand. So it would be a bit of a surprise, I think, to see Ralf Rangnick leave that setup, especially before the World Cup. My voice is starting to fail me, so we may need to cut this up pretty soon. Ethan says we should take this as a positive. Edu has made a lot of good signings, but he's also had some misses. Ultimately, we've achieved nothing whilst he's been here. This is a chance to do better. I don't like this rhetoric. I don't mind the comments saying that he's had some hits, he's had some misses. The idea that Edu has achieved nothing, raise your hand if you think Edu's achieved nothing. And then look at that hand raised in the air and think, why am I silly? Because obviously he has done a hell of a lot of good for Arsenal. Prior to Edu being appointed at the club, Arsenal's hierarchy in terms of transfers was in a bit of a state. The transfers we were making, the squad that we had at that time was not in a good way. And I think people take for granted what work has been done over these last 5 years. The reason why you can sit there and think if Arsenal don't win the league this season, it's an absolute failure. The reason you can have that point of view is in part due to the work that has been done by Edu to help construct a squad that is expected to try and win the league. That is the achievement of Edu. Of course, we did win the FA Cup during his tenure as well, which is worth pointing out, but it was many, many moons ago now. But I think that you have to be somewhat magnanimous. If you're a critic of Edu, that's fine. He's not perfect, as we've talked about. Sales could be better. Managing of certain contract situations could be better. Managing of certain recruiting targets could be better. But to suggest that he's achieved nothing, I think, is an incredible disservice to the work that has seen Ethan and myself very much more enjoy watching and covering Arsenal. Liam says, it might be just the romantic in me and probably not the best decision for the club, but I'd love to see Thomas Rosicky come in. Now, Thomas Rosicky, of course, is currently working, to the best of my knowledge, at Sparta Prague currently right now. He's the sports director there. I could not tell you for the life of me how well he's been doing. I can't say I've been keeping close tabs on Sparta Prague's progress. Of course, as a club that's been very much close to Thomas Rosicki's heart. He's one of my favourite players that I've ever watched play for Arsenal, and I was robbed of many, many more opportunities to watch him play because of the injuries that he suffered. But it's an interesting choice, an interesting name that I've not really seen too many other people mentioned at all. Peter says Michael Zorc is free. Don't know anything about that. Of course, previously with Borussia Dortmund. Don't know what happened at the end of his tenure there or why that's ended or if anything has changed quite specifically. But yeah, he obviously did a lot with Borussia Dortmund, and maybe that's the way forwards. But we know that Arsenal are going, it seems, to replace Edu. And Josh's statement at the end of that, comments that he made and the statement that was left seemed to indicate that. We're going to bring this to an end, mainly because my voice is giving up on me. Secondly, before you go, you've got one job that I'd like you to fulfill just to help out a good friend of the channel right now. And trust me, you'll be rewarded for doing this, because the guest that our good friend Sophie at the Highbury Squad has got on the show is excellent, because it's Mr. Clive Palmer, who is currently a massive part of not just the Arsenal Vision podcast, but he does plenty with the club now as well. And it's great to see him doing what he does. I've left a link to that show, which is live right now, in the description. If you could over there and do a bit of a TGT raid, tell Sophie that Tom sent you, and get all the support going in the chat box, and make sure we get as many people over there as feasibly possible. So head over to the Highbury Squad and go watch Clive's thoughts and Sophie's thoughts on what has been obviously a very big day and full of a lot of really, really quite surprising news for us. So go over there, give Sophie some support, let her know that I sent you. And yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you. Do drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. I'll be back with you tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. for more reaction to this story and more, right after a good night's sleep. So stay well, stay safe, stay happy and respectful, and as always, up the Arsenal.